Of course, because there is no true story, factual story, but there's only the story as lives between people and is co-created. One person's true story violates another person's true story. I had an occasion when I was working with the brownfield people. I had determined that one of the threads that was going to go through the larger story was about a young man who was a high school junior and was roped into fighting the fire. And he had a very frightening experience. When he was alone, the wind shifted, he couldn't see, he couldn't breathe, he knew he had to run, get out of the fire, and he saw a hose on the ground and said, if I run along that hose, I'll get out. And he ran on the hose, and then he said, I fell in a hole hard. Somebody dug a hole fighting the fire with dirt. And that's the last thing I remember. And he told me what had happened, that he'd had an Indian tank, it was then called, a 5-gallon galvanized tank of water on his back. And he thought it had kicked up and hit him in the back of the head and knocked him out. He said, I had a little cut back there. And it dribbled over him, it wet him down, he was in a hole, and the fire burned right over him and left him alive. So I put this in the story as part of the story when I first took it back to the brownfield people. And some of them came up to me after and said, you know, we think John's kind of boasting. We don't think that could have happened, really, you know? And he was my thread. and so the artist in me and the person giving back to the community were struggling until I realized that because story is a living thing, I can let it live in there. So I lead into that story now, and people are happy with it. I say, after he falls in the hole, and that's the last he remembers, I say, no one will ever know what actually happened. But what John thinks happened is this. And then I become John telling the story in a wonderful way, because he led into it. He said, I'm surmising. It was a wonderful word. I'm surmising. And then he led the story. And it worked because I let the story be alive, and I didn't say, this is what happened. I've got it pinned to a board like a butterfly. So you're right. Stories have a life that you can't petrify.